Welcome to the Mobility Talks edition number 11 already. So gearing up for a truly cycling city. So good afternoon and welcome to the live audience actually today. I'm actually Edwin Heesakkers, Managing Director for the Innovation Hub West here in the Netherlands. And last year in the middle of COVID, we've started this medium, Mobility Talks, by talking about the effects of mobility during the challenging COVID time actually. And since then, this initiative has grown to what it is right now, a discussion and talk with panelists that are thought leaders in the field of the topic, which we handle at that time during the Mobility Talks episode. And this is actually to inspire you as an audience and to achieve our sustainable mobility goals actually together with you. Let me talk a little bit about the audience today. So today we have around 180 live participants actually coming from 43 different countries, of which 21 are actually from the EU and 22 are from non-EU. So really good balance today. A little bit about the organization and the attendees by organization. A very good balance by the sector and good attendance for example, the students and the academies and the local authorities as well. So roughly 30% from the private sector, 30% roughly academy and students, roughly less than 30% on the public and 12% from the others and NGOs, which is quite balanced as well. So that's great to have you here. Feel welcome. As most of you know, we organize the mobility talks by the individual innovation hubs. And since today, we will look into the different aspects of active mobility, Innovation Hub West here based in the Netherlands and Innovation Hub North here over there in Denmark, Copenhagen, have organized this edition together. So since we have a lot of experience in active mobility in both walking and cycling in both our hubs. The Dutch as biking country number one, if we say so, if we look at it from a total displacements by bike on average. Well, you probably know we have 23 million bicycles over just 17 million people, inhabitants. So actually we own 1.4 bike per person here in the Netherlands. And while Copenhagen, from Innovation Up North, is actually known as cycling city of the world. So today we will discuss cycling in the cities and we'll look into the different aspects of active mobility and actually how it is possible to create conditions for the uptake of cycling or more cycling in cities and how we can generic change and how this can happen in this context. And I would like to state that active mobility, like walking and cycling, are actually very simple solutions to some of cities' most complicated mobility and sustainability problems. So with a look on the trends and the challenges we have ahead here in Europe, the thought leaders as speakers of today share their perspectives on active mobility as an important actually component of livable future spaces in Europe. So join our speakers in their debate. Watch until the end when our colleague Henrik Morgan from Innovation Up North will actually give updates on what does actually allow you to actively engage with EIT urban mobility. So over to Jean-Paul for the individual thought leadership panel introduction.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for the introduction. And indeed, it's a great pleasure to be back with the Mobility Talks after the summer break. And what better topic than cycling and active mobility to get back into action. And this time, we really want to dig deep into the practical, operational challenges of creating cities where urban mobility and active mobility are one. In recent times, there has been a renewed interest in cycling, as it does seem to be an urban mobility solution that ticks many boxes when it comes to reducing congestion, improving air quality, and addressing climate change and carbon footprint. So let's see if we have an active audience today, as we have our first poll open. What makes you cycle? And as I look at the results of this poll as it's ongoing, I see that people are active. They consider that cycling is a faster option than walking or public transport. It also keeps them fit. And some of them also have the idea that it's better for the environment than a car. In fourth option, however, good weather does seem to be a decisive factor as well on when you would get onto your bicycle. So I really do encourage you also to get involved in the Slido, raise your questions, and I will do my best to also raise those questions with the speakers. Today, we won't necessarily be addressing the arguments for or against cycling, but rather how to accompany change in cities to provide for more cycling. In Europe, there are some cycling capitals and cities, and we immediately think of the Netherlands and Denmark as major cycling hubs, and we'll be drawing on that experience with our speakers. But surely these are not just cultural exceptions. And we see also many experiments and pilot projects being carried out across Europe and the world to favor active urban mobility. So how to make this happen? Is it a question of infrastructure? Is it a question of incentives and disincentives to create behavior change? Is it a question of rethinking public space altogether? As we have seen in previous episodes of the Mobility Talks, whether on the public realm or on intermodality, making changes to urban mobility does often require to take a helicopter view. And to get us started and to get us thinking, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Marianne Weinreich, who is joining us from one of the cycling capitals, Copenhagen. Marianne is market manager in Ramboll's Smart Mobility division. She is also co-founder and chair of the Cycling Embassy of Denmark. So, Marianne, welcome to the talks, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I see that the slides are there. Yes. Yes, as you said, I am market manager in Ramboll, and I chair the Cycling Embassy of Denmark. And as you see here in this picture, yes, I bike in heels simply because it's much easier than walking in them. So that at least shouldn't be considered a barrier for cycling in everyday life. What I would like to talk to you about today is basically how to normalize cycling. Because as you mentioned, Jean-Paul, cycling has been having a comeback as an urban mode of transportation the least 10, 5, 15 years. But during the COVID pandemic, this has really boosted both the attention, the political will for change, funding, as well as concrete actions in cities around the world, literally from Berlin to Bogota. And what we have seen is everything from pop-up bike lanes to traffic calming measures to creating more space for outdoor serving and pedestrians in our public spaces. But what I would like to address is how to go from that situation where we were in, an emergency, a national, international pandemic, to normalizing cycling and making that part of everyday life for people in our cities. And what I would like to do is look at it from a Danish perspective and draw upon the experiences that we have in Denmark. As it was also mentioned, Copenhagen and Denmark is, along with the Netherlands, the two countries where cycling is really considered a mode of transport and something that is normal to do. And basically, the very simple answer to the question how to normalize cycling is to make cycling safe and easy from anywhere to everywhere. It is something that should be easy for everybody, regarding age or gender, to do. And when asked, why do Copenhageners cycle so much, it is not because we have some special cycling gene. It is simply because the city is built for it. Because what we see in the streets is also really how we use our cities as citizens. But there are many aspects in having, in normalizing cycling. We need bikes in our cities. There needs to be access to bicycles and many different types of bicycles. If you only have racing bicycles or mountain bikes available in the store, it may not be everybody that sees cycling as an option. And we also need that people actually are able to ride bicycles. That's not a given for everybody either. So making sure that cycling training is part of growing up or learning later in life, and having different bikes available is paramount. And we have seen that bike share in many cities have been that catalyst for getting more people cycling. Also, we need to acknowledge that there are different types of people and different types of cyclists. And the majority actually is the interested but concerned group in cities that is not, fully evolved as a cycling city. That's the majority. You will always have the strong and the fearless cycling, almost no matter what the conditions are. But the really big group, the majority, is the interested but concerned, and we need to cater for them in the way we design for cycling. And one of the backbone of a city for cycling is a protected network of cycling infrastructure that is safe and direct, convenient, and coherent. Because we see in many cities that there are a lot of good initiatives and measures being rolled out, but if it's not coherent and connected, it gives the citizen challenges. And we don't do that for instance, cars or public transport. You don't just have a car lane that stops in the middle of nowhere, but that is surprisingly enough okay to do for cycling. We see it all the time in many cities that suddenly, it stops and it's like, where do I go from here? Also, another measure in streets that are, for instance, very narrow. This is from a city called Aarhus in Denmark, also has a medieval part. Here, for instance, we have traffic calming. It's so-called cycling streets where the cars are guests. They are not allowed to overtake. So the streets are cycling priority streets. Another type of infrastructure that is very relevant is connecting the suburbs to, for instance, a bigger city. In this case here, Copenhagen, and the 25 municipalities surrounding Copenhagen that are working together to create regional so-called cycling superhighways, where commuters can direct and easy and fast cycle between home and work in Copenhagen. I don't particularly like the English word, superhighways. I don't like that word, highway, but that's a whole other story. I guess our panel will talk about wording later, because there is a lot around that to discuss. When you have your network, maintenance is very important. In Denmark, we have snow, and the cycle network in Copenhagen has a winter maintenance priority, meaning that the bicycle tracks have the snow removed before the car lanes. Because even though you can wake up and there's snow, using the bicycle, if that's what you do, you need to be able to do it even though there's snow that particular morning. Accidents also happen, and especially at intersections. And when building this network, those points in traffic where all the different modes meet, that's the intersections. And that's where problems and accidents happen. So creating safe intersections is also very important when designing for cycling. This little drawing here illustrates that unlike the Dutch, in Denmark, we have this, it's called Copenhagen left, but it's all of Denmark doing it, that when we turn left, we first ride straight, and then we wait, and then we ride straight again. That's a Danish solution, and in Denmark considered the absolute safest, because we don't have that, you know, mix of cars and bicycles within the intersection. Having to stop for a red light at an intersection is one of the most annoying things of cycling, because you have to use your own energy to get moving again. So making sure that you have a good flow through a city, reducing the number of stops and creating, for instance, green waves is something that is also being done by cities in Copenhagen as well as in other cities. In the city of Odense in Denmark, they have taken actually the idea from the Netherlands, having rain sensors in some of the biggest intersections, providing cyclists with longer green time when it rains. Because one thing is stopping at a red light, but stopping at a red light in the rain as a cyclist is even more annoying. So ITS is also moving from being car oriented only to also including cyclists and cycling. Every bicycle ride ends with a parked bicycle. So taking hand of the bicycles in the public space is very important, so that it's available to you everywhere you go and everywhere you stop. Because that's one of the benefits of being on a bicycle, that it's very easy to stop and then put the bicycle, park it, and move on. And then you need to be sure that it's also there when you get back to it. So, for instance, making sure that there is good bicycle parking at public transport hubs is very important. And on this particular point, we in Denmark look to the Netherlands, to the Dutch train stations for inspiration, because they are world class. We really, in Denmark, could do much better when it comes to train stations and handling that shift between the bike and public transport. For instance, in Copenhagen, another solution here is to make it free and available to bring your bicycle on the local S-trains. And the S-train company did it about 10 years ago, redesigned the platforms and the wagons and made it free. And it was actually a good business case. They had an in-passenger increase of 8%, meaning that they made money by making it free to bring your bicycle. And the solution works because it's designed for it in the system. When we invite people to our homes, we make sure to cater for them and feel welcome. And cities can do the same for cyclists. Cater for them, making them feel welcome in the city. It can be those small details that makes it easier or even more fun to be a cyclist. It can be the public bicycle air pump, providing you with air if you have a low or flat tire. The tilted garbage bin that makes it possible to get rid of that food or coffee that you're cycling with. Having that rest at the so-called foot rests at intersections, or actually showing cyclists that they count by putting up so-called cyclist counters. So when you are riding on a cold and rainy November morning, you can see that you are not the only one out there at that particular time. You are part of something, you're part of a group. So, so cyclist counters are a tool that can get the city data, which are very important, but it also shows the cyclists that they count. And as also Jean-Paul mentioned, that cycling is also a less expensive way of really having good mobility in a city. But even though cycling is less expensive than, for instance, public transport or car infrastructure, we should not provide cyclists with cheap solutions, because investing in cycling is investing actually in a very good cost-benefit ratio. It's been in many countries measured that for every kilometer you convert a car kilometer to a bicycle kilometer, society gains about €1 or more, depending on the different countries. So it's important also in the solutions to show that cycling is very important for urban mobility and is a benefit for the city and our societies. Perception of cyclists and cycling differs in different countries. In Denmark, in the Netherlands, a cyclist is just anybody. But in some countries, when you talk about cycling and cyclists, people have very specific connotations about what a cyclist is. In many cases, a young male can be in Lycra or not, but it is connotations that can maybe hinder people from seeing cyclists as something for them. So it's important to also to go beyond infrastructure and actually work with branding, because branding is about the 15 centimeters between our ears and how we perceive cycling. So having role models and different messages and showing that no matter who you are and what you do, you can find your way to cycle a specific bicycle and you have your own style. You don't have to look a certain way or ride a certain way. It's a matter of also perception that we need to work with. And you can have many different target groups. In Denmark, we have different measures targeting kindergarten children, having them have fun with small bicycles without pedals, so-called balance bikes that even 2-year-olds can just get on and have fun with, to schools and activities there around actually learning how to cycle in traffic. So taking, hand in the different stages in life. And that also means working closely with commuters and workplaces, because the commute is a daily activity, maybe not in the new normal after COVID. Not everybody have necessarily to go to work every day, but many people do. So working and making sure that when you arrive to your workplace, again, you're taken care of, you're catered for as a cyclist. Bicycle parking, it can be lockers or showers, just so you feel welcome and it's easy and convenient and attractive for you to use your bicycle. Another specific target group that I would like to bring up are women, because in the Netherlands and Denmark, it's a 50-50% split of men and women cycling. In Denmark, even a little higher amount of women than men cycling. Men cycle longer, women more often. But in many other countries and cities, it's as we see in the statistics, more men cycling, usually a 70-30% ratio. So there is a huge potential for getting more women cycling. But research show that women are more averse to risk than men. So that's why securing safe infrastructure is paramount in getting women cycling. Women also, to a great extent than men, travel in the daily lives with children and other relatives. So that factor also means that if you get women cycling, you also, to a great extent, get children cycling, and it becomes part of their life growing up with the bicycle. So catering for women, very important, and including women, very important. And also the elder groups. To make normalized cycling means also having cycling available to you in older age. And here, for instance, in Denmark, we have an organization called Cycling Without Age. that actually is spread around the world. And their idea is that everybody has a right to wind in their hair. And they have these schemes where volunteers take elderly in elderly homes on bicycle rides in these special designed rickshaws. And that gives both fantastic experiences, but is also very relevant and beneficiary for people with dementia, because, for instance, cycling in their old neighborhood triggers memories, and it spurs conversation across generations. So a fantastic example of how cycling can be also very inclusive. And if you're able to have from, you know, the pregnant woman here cycling, to the father with the kids, to the man in the business suit, and even if you can have your last ride in this world on a bicycle, in my opinion, it is a city worth living in, when it's also a city worth dying in. And that's, for me, is life cycling, or cycling for life, or a city where cycling is normal. So that was the words from me, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Marianne, for going through such a lively presentation with a lot of images that give a lot of food for thought. I have a couple of questions for you. My first one, you paint a picture of cycling that requires a lot of elements. You talk about the infrastructure, you talk about all the different cycling vehicles that one could cater for. You talk about the language on the roads, the importance of the crossroads. You talk about maintenance. But how does this happen for a city that is largely based around, let's say, road traffic being cars? It's almost like you would need to superpose a whole new set of urban mobility language on top of that. I mean, do you see that as possible when you're dealing with a city that has largely cars? Or do you think that there naturally has to be a sort of replacement of the way cities are currently set up towards the infrastructure and the language that you talk about?
Yeah, the cities we have and the language we use are based or rooted in that for the last 60 years, we have designed our cities around the needs of the car. The question has been, how many cars can we get into our cities? How many cars can we get through our cities? How many cars can we park in our cities? And we have now a situation where our cities are congested. We have noise pollution, air pollution, CO2 emissions, and we were so good at getting all these cars into our cities that the cars are now stuck in traffic. So we need to do something different. And what we need to do is prioritize differently, and also kind of redistribute the space and redesign our streets. And in most cities, you know, the space is there, but decisions have been made about who the streets are for. So usually it is possible to include cycling in the urban space, but it means that some space needs to be taken away from, for instance, car driving and given to cycling. It does not mean that you have to take away all the space for cars. It is possible to have it side by side, as I think Copenhagen is an example of. But it is a matter of redistributing space in the end.
Okay, so there is some reorganization, but it's possible to have that in parallel with cars. One question from the audience, which I think is very much linked to this, comparing population density, let's say in Copenhagen or Amsterdam, with cities that have a much larger population density. Do you think that is more difficult in such cities with much bigger populations, where the fight for space, which would be much stronger, much more difficult?
The challenge might be more difficult, but it's also more necessary, because the denser the city, the less space there is for cars, and the need for other alternatives to have good mobility, and really making sure that we have good mobility for all, and we ask the question, how many people can we have moving through our cities instead of how many cars? So the challenges and the mindset might be more difficult and challenging, but I think the need is even bigger. There's so much. The burning platform is burning even more in the bigger cities.
Yep, and as you were talking about the case of Denmark, I also have a question to you in terms of the cycling culture. Do you think the cycling culture preceded the cultural, societal awareness of the importance of cycling in a sustainable urban mobility mode, or do you think it's somehow this consciousness that created the cycling culture? Like which do you think went first, and what could be learnt for other cities, maybe especially in Southern Europe, that still very much need to make that switch?
It's a difficult question, but I think that it's not a coincidence that it's Denmark and the Netherlands that are, the leading cycling countries, and we have had a similar historic development because we never stopped cycling. Because we're talking about this as if people never cycled in cities outside the Netherlands and Denmark, but they did. In all cities, cycling were before the war really dominant. But after the war, we started building for cars. And in the Netherlands and in Denmark, in the beginning of the 70s, we started to see citizens react and protesting and demonstrating for cycling and against just taking away all the space and giving it to the cars. Maybe, I don't know, but it's an opinion. Could be the fact that Denmark, for instance, we don't have a car industry, and I believe the Netherlands really don't have either. So there haven't been that, dependence also on this industry that provided jobs and economic growth and so forth. So there has been a lot of support for the car industry, and we don't have that. So I think it's a matter of we didn't stop cycling, and I think I would like to stress that Danes don't cycle because it's sustainable. It's because it's easy and it's fast and it's safe. Then it's an added bonus that it's also active mobility, and you get your exercise and you can check off that green conscious, but it's not the main reason.
Okay, so maybe it's also to do with the way societies might perceive affluence, social status, and maybe in the Netherlands and in Denmark, there's less of a focus on elements like that linked to the car. But it's interesting to have that historical perspective, and that it's not that cycling just happened recently. I mean, it's just that cycling never stopped in Denmark and the Netherlands. Thanks a lot for that. I'd like you to just stay a little longer, and I would like also to introduce our panel, and I would like to see if they also have a question or a comment for you, Marianne. At this stage, I would also like to inform our audience that unfortunately, Lucy Mahoney from C40 and Irene McAleese from C.Sense both wrote in this morning saying that they were feeling ill. And were not able to make it on the panel, and they were the first to be very disappointed, as I know that they had prepared a lot for this talk, but hopefully we'll have them on board in a future episode. And we are joined nonetheless by Adrian Davis, who is Professor of Transport and Health in the Transport Research Institute at the Edinburgh Napier University. So Adrian, hello and welcome. And we have Talia Verkade, who is an independent writer on all issues mobility, and she is the co-author of a book that will be soon published called Movement. And I'm sure she'll be saying a few words about that book as well. So maybe Adrian, would you have a question or a comment to raise with Marianne's inspiring speech?
Well, I'd have so many comments that would take up the entire time, but I'll just be very strict with myself here. So, I mean, I think there are a number of things. The car industry stuff is quite important, and I had looked at that historically in terms of the difference between Denmark and the Netherlands and the UK, for example, and the role that the car industry in Luton and Dagenham and other places did help through the Marshall Plan to rebuild Britain in the eyes of America, which of course was already auto-dependent. So there is a thing there. My real the one I've chosen really is from a society in the UK. I'm speaking to you from Scotland, which we like to think is slightly different to the rest of the UK. From a car dominant society perspective, I think we have another journey to go on, so to speak, in that Pandora's box was open. It wasn't open so far that in the Netherlands and in Denmark, etc., and some other countries, you weren't able to tackle it and to reclaim the road space. But now it is so habitualized into countries and settlements like the UK that I think we have to have another journey, which is probably going to be led by climate change and the measures to tackle climate change. And in Scotland, we have, for example, a target to reduce car kilometers traveled by 20% by 2030, which is an enormously challenging target. But I think we'll see the co-benefits come out of that, which means we will see more people choosing to travel actively. So I just would be interested in your comments on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I think Marianne, maybe a reaction. I think it's best if you react straight away as it's hot. So will climate change, in fact, redefine cities as opposed to cycling versus cars as such?
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. When I started in this sector 20 years ago, talking about climate and environment and cycling was not something we did. We know it was an added benefit, but people didn't really care because it was just, something that was too abstract. But right now it's become very concrete. People have had flooded basements. They've seen the storms and what it can do. So it becomes more evident in everyday life. And I think that really can be like COVID has been something that generates a whole new way of looking at cycling. And I think also you're right that it also needs different measures. Where we're at in Denmark right now has primarily been what you could call carrots, making it easier and safe to cycle. We are now at a point where we are actually also challenged by the car, cheaper cars. People are driving more, having more cars, and we need to look at stopping the decrease in cycling. It's outside Copenhagen. It's in Copenhagen. It's increasing, but we need to have, the whip and making it harder to drive also, because we have these two types of measures that we can use, making it easy or making it easier to cycle or making it harder to drive. And then I know City of Copenhagen, at some point they talked about the carrot and the stick and the tambourine being talking about cycling and branding and promoting cycling. So I think all three needs to be in place to have change.
Thanks, Marianne. And maybe also then to Talia, a question or a comment for Marianne.
Hello, Marianne. Very nice to see all the beautiful pictures from Copenhagen. And very interesting to hear you compare our countries. I would like to reflect on two things. You mentioned the word bicycle highway or bicycle super cycling highway. You already remarked that you feel a little bit uncomfortable by using this word. For me, it was very recognizable because I'm a journalist and I started out with the idea, with the question, why aren't there cycling highways between every city in the Netherlands? And now, that was 4 years ago. And now, as Jean-Paul mentioned, I've written a book together with Marco de Brummelstroet, the Amsterdam University professor, and also known as the cycling professor. And now I have a completely different view actually on the idea of cycling highways. And it was actually through his first questioning my assumptions. So in the beginning, I thought cycling, I saw it as a solution to the car. And I think this is also what I hear in your talk, that cars are a problem, especially in cities. And if we replace them with bicycles, we will solve that solution. But then something happens with the bicycle. It's it can very quickly become a car on two wheels, because it's it will be, everything else would stay the same. Then streets would be, it is public space, but it would still be traffic space. And cycling will be about getting as efficiently and as quickly as possible and as comfortably as possible from A to B. So you also showed the rack where you can put your leg on. It's wonderful. I've never seen it in the Netherlands, but it's also this same logic, that it's all about getting us comfortably and quickly and efficiently from A to B. And I want to oppose that with a picture you also showed of cycling without age. I was really, really touched by that image. I haven't seen this in the Netherlands. We have like the tandem where a healthy person is cycling together with a less healthy person. I also find it always very, very touching. And for me, it shows that cycling can be so much more than like healthy traffic. Also, active mobility is also very interesting. It's this idea that cycling is about mobility being using the street as a traffic space from getting from A to B. But I think that the example of the cycling without age shows that it's not only inclusive, like inclusive transport or traffic, but it's something completely different. To me, I see just a young person engaging in helping elderly people, getting the wind through their hair. So for me, this is actually a sort of the short version of a whole, like Alice in Wonderland kind of free fall through the rabbit holes of mobility I've gone through myself in the last couple of years. That cycling can be so much more than being traffic, and streets can be so much more than something to enable movement from A to B.
Yeah, so it's not just infrastructure, but it's also about that experience, how it can connect different people in a slightly different way than in a car. You're sharing another kind of experience. Marianne, maybe a quick reaction then to that comment.
Yeah, but I totally agree with your points and thoughts there. And actually, also in my work, I'm not a traffic planner or an engineer. I have a humanistic background, and I work with users, and also I do policy and promotion. And usually when I'm working in promotion of cycling, we really try to make sure that the activities makes people try cycling, because you cannot talk about cycling, because cycling is something you need to experience, because it does something to you both mentally and physically when you start doing it in your everyday life. If you're not used to it, if you used to be in a car, you sleep better at night, you may lose some weight, but it's more also about the kind of the de-stressing factor that cycling can have. It is an experience, and that's also why it's important that cycling is not designed, as you say, as if cycling is a smaller car, because it's a completely different experience being on a bicycle. You smell people, you can touch people, you feel the rain and the cold and the sun, and this it is it's full of what's it called?
Joy.
And impressions. You are part of the city and the pulse of the city and other people in a completely different way than when you're in a car and you're in that very individual space surrounded by metal.
Well, thank you so much, Marianne, for having shared all those views with us. We will let you go, but you're welcome to also stay. But thanks a lot for having been part of these mobility talks, Marianne.
It's me that are saying thank you.
Thank you. So now I can grill my panel. The panel having grilled the keynote speaker, I can now turn back to the panel. So I have a couple of things prepared for you. I would like us to maybe just launch a short video clip that might go against some of the things that we've just been saying, in fact. It's a short video clip that essentially shows someone cycling around the streets of Brussels. So can we launch that? Yeah. So here you see our cyclist on a cycling lane. We see a car slightly badly placed there, but the cyclist, that's also something that's interesting with the cyclist, is that, as Marianne mentioned, he doesn't want to stop, you know, so he would never go into the queue and just wait for the cars to move on. I mean, he will try and swerve and dodge, but that obviously comes at a certain cost and expense. It's not an easy thing to do, and you can see that you really have to weave your way around. So there is a kind of cycling lane, but it's not being respected very much by the surrounding cars, and it does create a situation where the cyclist is possibly at risk, and it's not necessarily the most pleasant experience, I would imagine. So my question is to Adrian, because you are linking both the topics of transport and health, and I can see definitely cycling as a sport, as a leisure activity, you know, surely must have some health benefits. But when you see something like this, should we really be promoting the health benefits of cycling when it comes to an urban mobility solution?
Well, so straight away, of course, yes, we should, because even in that hostile example from your home city, I think, the benefits still outweigh the disbenefits, and that's been checked through very comprehensively through academic research. So we know if you're exposed to the risk, of course, of being injured, weaving in and out of that traffic, and you're exposed to the air pollution as well as the noise pollution. It's just unpleasant, and it probably stresses you. So that's not going to help in terms of blood pressure and other things, but the cardiovascular benefit is very, very substantial. So your risk overall in terms of life years, of good life and length of life, is increased through cycling. We do have a lot of really good, robust evidence now that's particularly come through in the last 20 years, I'd say. But so there is a clear argument for that. But that mess that you showed on the video means that the municipality has got to do a lot of work to change it. It looked just like out of the UK that did that. Looks very familiar to me, unfortunately. So a lot of work to be done, but it does not negate the fact that there are really some stupendously beneficial benefits that come to the individual. And let's not forget the benefits are also felt by society, because you've chosen not to drive in a metal box and pollute the environment and create the externalities, which include danger as well as the pollution. So that's a simple, straightforward answer to that. Cycling is good per se for Homo sapiens, and it's helpful for the planet because you're not making a choice to drive in a polluting vehicle.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. I thought you might not be too challenged by that one, but
no, I wasn't.
Clearly, their health benefits are still very important. I would like then to show another image. This time we should be seeing two images side by side. Like, the thing that brings them together is definitely the bad weather, right? So you have your cyclist who's struggling in the sort of sleet and rain, and on the other hand you have the windshield perspective, which, you know, is not bad. I mean, it's raining, but at least you're protected. You're still in a traffic jam, Joe, though. So my question to Talia is almost a sort of philosophical one, you know. Would you prefer being stuck in a traffic jam, but still remaining nice and dry, or to be freely moving in between cars and, you know, going your own route, but yet possibly being completely soaked?
That's a beautiful question. I think it would be great if that would also be if the question would of course I would, you know, I have been in both situations, and especially when you're with friends in the car and it's raining outside and you have Tom Waits on the radio, you know, Diamonds on My Windshield, and beautiful music, then this little metal box is such a comfort and such, we call it gezellig, such a like cozy place, that it's almost and then you see the like the cyclists outside, you know, and you're in the traffic jam, but it's not really a problem because it's just so comfortable and warm and pleasant. So it's very easy to prefer that, and I understand that so many people prefer that to being on a bicycle in the rain, although that can also, if you have experienced it, it can be also very interesting because you have the rain on your skin the cold, and if you're, it depends a little bit on my mood, but I can have this feeling of invincibility. You know, you can just, I can have it, and people don't know what a great experience this is. And I'm cold and I'm wet, but I'll be home, and then I'm going to take a warm shower, and I have this. So that's actually also happening. But I understand that most people would prefer, like the sitting in the cozy traffic jam with the radio on. So, and that is why I think this shouldn't be an individual question, because it is a question for society. Because I think we should ask the question about the costs. So, what does it cost society, and not only in an economic sense, but in the sense of the health and in a social sense, and in how we use our public space. I think those are the questions, and what are the tremendous costs of when things go wrong, traffic crashes, and things like that. Does that all, and I'm having to find the English word, is it all worth, you know, for not getting wet when you're driving home?
Yeah, no, and as Adrian was talking about the climate change aspect, I mean, we have to elevate this beyond the question of the individual preference. We have to think about this in a more holistic manner, as you're mentioning as well. And that naturally maybe leads me on to my next question, where I would like to play the role of a mayor. Okay, so I'm a mayor. I'm in my city. I know my citizens. I mean, they do like their car. But, you know, I am in the process of wanting to rethink my mobility and my transport strategy in my city, which is largely based on public transport and motorized vehicles. And I'm willing to take some risks as part of my political strategy for the next elections. And I would like you to help me understand what would be those 3 first steps, and I would like them to be in order, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, that would allow me to actually create change in my city and bring about more active mobility cycling solutions to my citizens. Adrian, what would be that 3-step recipe?
Okay, so the overarching it, and I'll try to make it 3 and in the order you want. As a public health doctor, I'd say you need to do it from a public health, population health perspective, which means look at it from the whole town city perspective. Don't just do corridors or what we've done in the past. Look at the whole town, whole city, whole village, even if it's a large village. Look at the entirety of it. Then you can start, that's the first thing. Then the second thing is start to segment your audience. And one of the things we must do for the countries with low levels of cycling is to think about the people that don't cycle, that don't know about the rain on your skin and the feelings of delight and euphoria in certain times when you're cycling, who haven't had that experience. We've got to target very clear messaging to them, because the health messaging probably won't work. You know, it's one of the things that comes out of it, but it's not something you sell it on. As Marianne had already said, you've got to make the structure, the infrastructure of the area, the town, city, safe for women. So you need to think of what are women's needs. Now, they tend to be often more local, particularly with the childcare responsibilities as a bit of a stereotype, but it's real enough when we look around how society still largely operate. So we need to think about women's particular travel needs in order for them to feel safe. And part of that, just to kind of add a third layer to it, is I think we must ensure, as Brussels has done recently, but many other places have still yet to do it, we need to reduce the speed limit. Firstly, it's necessary but insufficient, but we must make sure that speeds in urban areas where people are is nothing more than 30 kph. And then we do all the other interventions on top of those, which add synergetically to create an environment where people choose actively to cycle because they perceive it to be safe. So that's very packed all together, John Paul. So I hope that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so my step 1 is looking at infrastructure, but at a city scale, not in a specific part of my city. Number 2, I need to try and get, especially those users who are not or who are most at risk of not going on their bicycles, with maybe a particular attention to women and what would be their safety needs. And then the speed limit measure, you reckon that I should go for the whole city 30 kilometers per hour, pretty much a blanket rule. I mean, just to make it simple.
Absolutely. And of course, if you let me have 4, 5, and 6, I would then tell you about all the other interventions you need to do, which would include some bus use, which we haven't talked about as well, because we need various ways to get people out of cars. They're not all going to go to bikes.
Okay, so I have my 3 steps from Adrian. I then turn to Talia for her 3 steps.
Yes, I would. I'd like to take the other end of the stick that Adrian just gave by suggesting the 30 kilometer per hour limit. I think I would start questioning first, as in a mayor. Why do we center all our ideas about how we design our public space around the maximum speed limit for a vehicle? So why is that the starting point of our thinking? How did that happen? And I would say that we could do so much more. We could start to design around people, for example, instead of the speed limit of a car. We could design around nature or the culture. And the point is, it's not a technical question. So as long as you keep thinking about the speed limit, you consider the question of what has to be done as a technical question. But it's a political question, and there are so many more choices to be made around the question: what goals do our streets have? So, and then secondly, I think to do this, it would really greatly help to involve other people than mobility thinkers and traffic experts, because I think the logic has become so ingrained in our heads that streets are there to move us around as quickly as possible, as sort of pipelines for free traffic flow, that if you want to question this, you will need other people. So you should not put a public question about public space in the hand of traffic experts, and in the it's become this automatic logic for almost anyone. It's really hard to get out of. So you need people from I don't know, ecologists, or maybe people who are experts on children's health, or just the city historic, or maybe people from churches. What if this is a public space, but it's also there's a Catholic school around the corner. What do the people who are in charge of this school, for example, how do they envision? What is their idea of public space? Then we have a political question again. And then thirdly, I think it's and this has been for me the greatest discovery is that it is all about becoming more reflective of the language we're using. So for example, the term active mobility. So you want active mobility, but why do we call this active mobility? We could also say that walking and cycling would be mobility, and driving a car would be passive mobility. But we're not talking about it like this because we have taken over the internal logic of seeing it from behind the windscreen. So we design streets with this 30 kilometers per hour limit, and automatically that makes us a sort of a car driver. And then we start to hope those people who are walking and cycling, they're active, and they're also very vulnerable. But why are they vulnerable? We could also speak about dangerous car users. Or Marianne gave the example of the rain sensor, which is a very interesting one. And it took me a while to understand what's so strange about it. So you give people on bicycles in the rain a bigger priority, but you could also say, why can't we give people who are not in the rain, it means that you could also say that people, when it's not raining, people on bicycles are having to wait longer. But why? So and why do we close off a street, or do we open it up for people on a car-free Sunday? And why do we call this a car-free Sunday if there are no cars? Why are we still talking about cars? So this is this windshield logic. And I think it's very important to become reflective with it. It's the most important that you become reflective of it, or that we together start to understand that our thinking of the streets has been influenced greatly by traffic logic, by car logic, and if we see it, we can free ourselves from it. So that
okay, so So you want me to have a political strategy that effectively changes the whole mindset of my city. So I would need to go from a mindset of a city for anything but mobility by cars. Just to put it a little bit sort of simple terms, but my city should not be built around mobility by cars.
But there should not be. We are centering our thoughts. Sort of 30 kilometers per hour logic, I think, shows this very much, or traffic sign.
Yep.
We are centering everything around the car. I think cars can have a place. We will need cars probably for things, but we can maybe unlearn to design everything around the car as the smallest unity.
Yep.
And that starts with changing our language.
I need to have a support from a multidisciplinary team that will look at my city in a much broader sense. And I need to change my marketing, my language to help accompany this change away from a car-based language to a more general movement and nature-based language, let's say. Okay, so I'll see if I can put those 6 steps also to the vote to the audience. Let's see in which order they will appear. I would also like to go a little bit deeper in some of the actual tools that will help cities create change. I know that there are quite a few local authorities listening in, probably also trying to understand, step by step what they can do to create change. Would you have any good examples from your experience in this sector of a couple of cities that have set up measures, whether these are incentives, financial incentives, or they can be linked to the 30 kilometer per hour type rule, or other kinds of measures like this that have actually created a change, or sometimes been completely unsuccessful that you could build on for our audience? Adrian, maybe first.
Well, I'll give you an example from a city that I worked in for over 9 years part-time, but I was based in the traffic department of Bristol City Council, which is in the southwest of England and known to a certain extent for having slightly higher levels of cycling than other cities of similar size in the UK. So it has had relatively, I stress relatively, a fairly good mobility share for cycling, but became Cycling City in 2008 as part of a former government, Labour government initiative to try and increase cycling levels. And I was fortunate at the time to be the public health advisor who was sitting in the transport department, which was a unique role in the UK. That's not normal, but we were not in normal times. And so I got to be able to help design the 20 mile an hour 30 kph program for Bristol, because previously it was all was 30 miles an hour. And my director of public health, who was my boss, said, Adrian, what are the top 5 things to do? Well, there were a number of other things, but the most important one was to do this citywide intervention. So we did do that. And one of the important things we did after we'd done it and while we were doing it was to measure what we were doing in every way. And I think that helped me, because the training of public health practitioners is to be very thorough in the measurement and understanding of what the intervention is and what the outcomes might be. So we measured it as thoroughly as we could, and then we had independent validification after we'd put the whole scheme in, which took about 5 years to do the whole city of nearly 500,000 people. And the independent evaluation did come back and show that we were, on average a year, saving 4 lives from being taken by being injured generally by a motor vehicle, and quite a lot more lives where people would have been injured seriously but were no longer being injured seriously, which actually fits very well with the Vision Zero and the sustainable safety programs, which are now quite widespread in many countries. So I think that is an important one, and that was actually relatively a success story, and despite the battles we've had since, that remains. And I think that remains to help cities like Bristol and Edinburgh as well, because they've got the same thing in Edinburgh citywide, to be a platform, as I indicated earlier, to do many other and multiple interventions which will help the city prosper. So that's one. I don't know if you want to digest or come back to me on that one.
Yeah, and maybe see if you have other ideas to explore. But I think what you're saying is that the 30 km/h rule allows you to have a city level intervention in a way. So it's a kind of a way in to reorganize space.
Yes, and an important point here, because in public health, health inequalities is very much central to what we do and how we think about things, that actually it is a leveler in the fact you touch the lives of every citizen generally if you're doing it across the whole city. It's not going to be, often interventions get consumed by the most affluent who are able to take up and to utilize them, so it actually increases health inequalities. But something like a 30 kph speed limit across the whole city affects all of us roughly in the same sort of way, in terms of a little bit safer.
Yeah, understood. Talia, would you also have a specific example in a city that you've witnessed that you would like to share, that has actually created an incentive for more people to take up cycling as an urban mobility solution?
I think it's nice to compare two things that of the separate protected bicycle lanes, and maybe bicycle lanes in general, and then I will take two examples which from the outside look the same, and which I think are very different from the inside. So I'll explain now. So in the Netherlands, since the 1970s, we've put up many bicycle lanes, as you know, many separate bicycle lanes, and this has made it possible to get us all easier and more efficiently and quickly from A to B, usually from home to work, but also to the supermarket. And I'm enjoying this very much as a Dutch woman myself every day. And it has big advantages. And I also understand that many people look at the Netherlands as a great example, because it works really well. And what actually works really well is that we all can continue our moving around the city much easier. So car drivers also, because we are not in each other's way. So we have this separate bicycle lane, and then we have the car lane, and everyone can make more kilometers per year. So the amount of movement in kilometers which we are making in the Netherlands keeps increasing. Now in Paris this year, everybody probably knows, a lot of bicycle lanes have been made, like the pop-up bicycle lanes, but also more permanent bicycle lanes. So from the outside, it looks exactly the same. But the philosophy behind it is not getting everyone more quickly from A to B, but it is giving everyone the opportunity to get to their destinations without becoming dependent on like really fast, and like motorized mobility. And that means that the destinations actually have to decrease. I think many people probably will know, like the model of the 15-minute city. From the outside, it sounds exactly like the Netherlands, but from the inside, I think it's a completely different philosophy, because it doesn't try to increase the number of kilometers people can travel. It tries to decrease the distances between people and the places which are meaningful and important to them. So I think for me, Paris is a very inspiring example, because I think in the Netherlands we now, and I think Marianne also commented on this, that the same is happening in Denmark. There's actually a problem with people not cycling. We're not. There's not so much changing anymore in the Netherlands and Denmark. You could say this is just because we're ahead, of the rest. But I think it's also because it's especially in the Netherlands, it has really become the goal has to become to be able to move around as quickly as possible. And this is just an aim that eventually we will travel further to destinations which will also just will not become closer. So and in Paris, it's really about the destinations becoming more closer. So I think that's a very inspiring example for me.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it answers also a question in the audience talking about, if you build it, will they come? in terms of, cycling infrastructure. And I suppose what you're saying is that it's not just a question of the infrastructure, it's around the policy behind, and that will also help getting cyclists on the road. We do see an interest, though, in cycling, a surge in cycling, and that will probably also create other externalities. This is something I'd like to reflect on. Before that, there's a question in the audience that I think is interesting in relation to public bike sharing schemes, which is something that we're seeing a lot as a development, or almost as a lifestyle development that is completely integrated into cities. Do you see, or how important do you think public bike sharing schemes are in getting more people from cars onto bicycles? Do you have a view on that, Adrian?
Well, I did, and in fact, I was thinking it was in my listings as for one of the things that could be one of the failed interventions, because we've seen a lot of bike sharing schemes in the UK in the last few years. Let's just say the last 3 years, where the scheme has come and gone. It just hasn't lasted. Then there may have been some reputational damage because the way the bikes just get left all over the place by people taking them. And the marketing of the whole program hasn't been done well. It has not been thought through in terms of integrating that cycling into the existing city infrastructure and what that city infrastructure is. So I think you have to be very careful with bicycle sharing public schemes. There have been some really good successful ones, well documented in the literature, but I think you do have to be careful because quite a lot of them could fail and leave a bit of damage, reputational damage in their wake as a result of being badly implemented. So it possibly is about how you implement them, but I think you've got to think about the infrastructure that you've got there and the public conversations you have about what this intervention is, what it is for, to help it ease it in rather than just let it happen and just sit back and watch.
And Talia, in countries where there's a lot of private ownership of bicycles, how do you see the effect of shared bicycle options?
So actually, all the international like Mobike, O-Bike schemes didn't work in the Netherlands. They were tried out. They were left behind, like I think many places, and they disappeared. Actually, they were up for sale here on the second-hand market, and now they are private bicycles. So sometimes you see this Mobike or O-Bike, and it's O-Bikes, I think. They're private now. What is a wildly popular? There's one very successful shared bike system in the Netherlands, which is called the OV Fiets. It's a public transport bike. And you can rent it if you have if you're a member of the National Railways. You can just add this very easily to your card, and then you can very quickly and easily at almost any station, all the big stations and many small stations as well, you can get a bicycle, and it mostly helps people to get to their destination. So they will go to the train station on their own bicycle, and then they will take the train, and then they will take this public transport bike. It's a blue-yellow bike, and to go to their destination, and it keeps growing every year. Like already, I think for 15 years in a row, it sort of explodes, and people are using it more and more. So that is very popular. And apart from that, we have a thing called swap feeds. I'm not sure if it's there are also in more countries now. And that means you don't have to buy a bike anymore, but you sort of rent a bike, or and if something is wrong with it, you can just bring it to the shop and they will give you a different one. And this is very popular among students, but you also see them lying around more than like the owned bikes. And I think what is interesting about this is that if it's your own bike, you will take care of it, and you might either learn to repair your own bike, which is a valuable thing to it's just being a human who evolves his capabilities through his bike. I think that is something valuable, which isn't talked about a lot. And if you don't, you might support like your local bicycle man, which is also valuable because it will keep you in touch with your own community. So, and the swap feeds is really, I just see people like waiting in line in front of the shops in the morning sometimes to just because something, their tire is flat and they have to wait till they get a new bicycle, and you become more of a consumer. And if it's your own bicycle, you become it's your ownership, and you will tend to it. So that's also, I think, an interesting thing to take into account when talking about bicycle schemes. It's not only about, again, I may be repeating myself, but it's not only getting from A to B as efficiently as possible, but there's so much more to a bicycle.
Yeah, and how it all integrates into a city. Let's just have a look at the Slido just to see how the audience voted on your different steps. I think we can put up the results. I think it would be nice that the audience also sees that. And we have, I think, the two top options are about providing infrastructure that connects very much to public transport, and the second result is we need to better understand why people don't cycle, and comes third is improving road safety, especially for women. So that clearly also triggered a response in the audience. I would like to continue a little bit on this topic of the externalities and some of the effects of having more cyclists on the road, especially in this transition phase where there are also still cars on the road. And one of the elements of development is also the fact that you have different types of bicycles, different types of vehicles that are operating on different speeds. So you will have, for instance, electric bicycles, self-powered bicycles, and other types of active mobility, let's say. Do you see a risk of all of these different options? And in fact, every day almost you see something slightly new out there on the road, a slightly different wheel, or do you see a risk that there will just be too many types of vehicles out there on the streets that will just start to cause a lot of chaos, essentially, and make life quite difficult, quite dangerous? Do you see that as a risk, Adrian?
Well, if you look at the image you showed us of Belgium and Brussels, then that was chaos and dangerous to my mind as an experienced lifelong cyclist. I wouldn't enjoy that. So I think we already have chaos. Now, if we have chaos with lower kinetic energy in the system a bit, because people are riding different types of trikes and bikes and cargo bikes and all the other things, and electric bikes, which we must obviously include into what we talk about today, then at the moment, I think actually the more the better, because what you want to show to the non-cyclists is that there isn't just the standard kind of simple one option bike out there. And Marianne did refer to this. It's not like going to a bike shop and thinking, well, if I want a bike, it has to be a kind of fast bike, which men tend to prefer, and that's the only type that's going. Clearly, I think that the diversity of options, the broadening of the market, what's on offer, is a benefit. I mean, I just think that is the case. And just as a coda to all that, the e-bike, which we've talked about, it's coming. I think it is here now in such numbers that you just peer at bikes that pass you and just notice the little box on the back or strapped to one of the parts of the frame. That we are seeing all these sorts of bikes. Now, there are some problems, not least because of speed, etc., and some bikes being tampered with deliberately to increase speed. But I think overall, in terms of externalities, the range of offer is a good thing. We might need to review that in years to come, but at the moment, I think we should welcome it.
Okay, but maybe to Talia, that would be an interesting one to get your views, because you talk a lot about the experience, okay, of these mobility options. But wouldn't it be the case that when you're cycling and you're experiencing these types of mobility solutions, you also want to experience that sense of freedom, that you can essentially go anywhere? So wouldn't it be the case that the more these kinds of solutions develop, the less they will be respecting rules, or the more you would need to somehow rethink also the traffic control, because you're dealing with a solution that essentially can take you anywhere, whereas in a car you're still pretty fixed in what you can do and the kind of infrastructure you need. Do you see a problem that might even be going against the way people want to cycle?
I'm not sure I completely understood your question, but I think so. If it's about all the different types of bicycles which are developing right now and which are being used and which are coming into conflict with themselves or each other, I think we should just talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, why is there so little space for the bicycles? And if we talk about public space again, what would happen? So it's you can keep supporting the idea of cycling and give it a little bit of subsidy and improving it a little bit, but maybe we should also talk about, I think Marianne also touched on this, the stick If it is such a problem but I hope, maybe if you correct me if I understand, if maybe I didn't understand your question very well, but if the problem is there isn't enough space, then should we solve this problem inside like the little space there is? Maybe this is my Dutch approach to the question, but.
Well, I was just wondering, because I remember, for instance, cycling in Copenhagen, as Marianne mentioned, the left turn. I was completely confused, so I was getting told off constantly because I probably wasn't doing the right thing, and that's a very rules-based system where people are cycling according to very strict set of rules, let's say. But in general, you would associate cycling with the ability to go wherever you want. You know, you can cross a city square in a diagonal where people are lounging, and that's kind of part of the fun, of the freedom, of the experience. So I'm just wondering if you put in more rules, will you also make it less pleasant in a way to cycle? Like it makes it more fixed, more strict, more rules-based.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about speed. So in the Netherlands currently, because of there's a big increase of electrical bicycles. They're also, they're more expensive. You can also make more profit when you sell them. So there's a big business model behind it, a bigger business model than behind the traditional like muscle bicycle. And as you can go more quickly, you can go further. But it will also become more dangerous. So, and it's not too much of a discussion actually right now. It's only like, oh, maybe people should wear helmets then, But you could also just really question the big question: if cycling becomes less safe because of the fact that it's more than human powered. As long as it's human powered, of course something can happen always, but it will probably really be an accident. It will be not be part of the system, because I think people who, if there's a good infrastructure to cycle, it's really intrinsically safe to cycle on a normal bicycle, because you cannot go faster than you can on your own muscle power. But as soon as electric bicycles add to the situation, it becomes more of a conflict. And for me, it's sort of curious that in the Netherlands, I'm not sure how it is in other countries, there's not much of a distinction made. It's more or less people are saying like, oh, it's just very good if everyone can cycle. But I think if you start to apply the rules, I think let's talk about speed first. So speed is what actually is making things more dangerous. So if you can gain freedom by limiting the speed, I think that would be at least should be one of the political choices there is. And currently it really isn't.
Okay, and although it's still a little bit car-based, it does link up to some extent to that 30 km/h concept, looking at speed and creating a bit more equality on that in the city. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
quickly.
I feel like, okay, quickly, about the 30 km/h. In the Netherlands, this is also, right now it will happen in Amsterdam. It will go from 50 to 30. And of course, I just commented on the whole concept of designing your street around the speed limits of car. Why would you do that? But of course, it is an improvement. And I think now it can be a very interesting question. Do you need like more rules, and do you need more like speed bumps and stuff like this? Or could you start taking stuff away, like taking away traffic lights, for example? I mean, if it is really below 30, or at least below 25 or 20, the speed becomes so safe that you will not need traffic lights. You can see it in the Netherlands, for example, in any residential streets. There are no traffic lights because it's 30, the limit. So I think there's a really interesting way to also escape from the traffic machinery which we've built by going down to 30. But it would be very preferable, I think, to not call it like 30, but let's call it more like human speed. And then still, it's 8 meters per second. It's 2 parking spaces per second. So is it safe enough?
Yeah. Okay. Now that's a good one to wrap up on. And I would like to ask then a very final question, really just a conclusion. We will also ask that to the audience, looking a little bit forwards. What is the end game then, according to you? Can we develop these active mobility solutions and they will always coexist with motorized vehicles, or should we rather be thinking about the end game being that these active mobility solutions have completely replaced motorized vehicles? So I'll give you each let's say 45 seconds to respond to that one. Adrian.
Okay, so what we haven't mentioned, the UN 6 report on climate change, and that is the thing we all should have in the back of our minds, because we have to decarbonize the transport sector, whichever country we're in. Just you're lucky if you're in a Dutch or Danish situation because you've already got a head start. But we need to decarbonize, so we have to largely remove cars from our streets, and EVs is not going to do that. It's not going to make our cities safer, and we have to think about the life, a cradle to grave costs of the production of all these vehicles and how they're going to be charged and all the rest of it. So we really need to make walking and cycling so normative and so perceivably safe that it is the everyday choice of most people all the time. And obviously there are subsections of society where we need to help people get around because they have mobility issues, but we have to largely remove it. We need a new age. The age of the car must be over.
Thank you so much, Adrian. You were a great panelist. Thank you so much for sharing those views with us. Talia, 45 seconds.
I think it would be very interesting if we can look back in the future on the period we are now in, and we will see that this is actually the anomaly. So cities have existed for thousands of years, and we've done without high-speed mobility for thousands of years. And cities are actually, of course, organizations of people. They're not. To me, they're not like streets, or they are people. Cities are people. So, and for me, it would be very interesting if we already can start to learn to see that we are living in the anomaly. So we're living in a very curious age of about 70, 80 years now, where we have car-centric street design and city design. And I think if we can start to see that this is the exception and that it's actually human life in cities is before that and after that will just evolve around people again, I think it will. We have active mobility. We don't even have to call it that. It's just be human movement.
Well, and that also movement being the title of your book, which is soon to be published. So thanks a lot, Talia, for having shared also your views. Thanks to the two of you. It's been really, really inspiring. And I think we can even show the results as they're coming in the audience. Definitely optimistic, active mobility will be the main mode of transport. There will still be some shared cars. And I think also this importance of looking at specific social groups, some types of users, and how you can get them onto that active mobility trajectory. So you can still continue putting in your results. Thanks a lot. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this discussion. I will now be handing over to Henrik Morgan, who's Director of Innovation Hub North, who also partnered in organizing this episode of the Mobility Talks, and he will be giving us the conclusions to this session. So Henrik, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the panel here. Yes, I think we heard from the start and actually here at the conclusion, this is about normalizing cycling. That's basically the challenge we are looking at. And what I took away from that, what that really means is, well, yes, the bikes, the vehicles, they do matter. And for example, shared services for bike sharing could be part of the solution, but they also contain a risk if the programs are not used according to, let's say, public order and the interest in terms of having a tidy and a livable city. So bikes do matter, but equally important and perhaps even more is to understand the cyclists. So any segment of the population, the urban population, that is or could be using cycles more actively, more frequently in their day-to-day lives, we need to listen to each of these segments and, as it was expressed, give them what they ask for. And that leads to the third main element, which is really, it's about bikability. So the way how we structure and design our cities, the urban space, the furnitures in the public space in order to cater for the interest and convenience of cyclists, and also to have a speedy transitioning by means of cycle from A to B in a safe and coherent way. So with this, thank you very much. And I'm also happy to say that in the 2 years of operation that EIT Urban Mobility has existed already, we have already a number of innovation projects running this year and last year that actually support active mobility and in particular cycling. You may want to have a brief look at these and our webpage, where there is a very short descriptions of these innovation and research based projects that can inspire also your geography and your business wherever your starting point is. But EIT Urban Mobility is also supporting startups across Europe, and many of those that we already work with are indeed also active in the active mobility area. So also here we see an innovativeness and also many business opportunities still to be discovered. And then finally, and this would be the first slide here, we have also in EIT Mobility a program we call Academy. And our Academy is really our knowledge building program to close urban mobility knowledge gap with trainings of different education methods across disciplines. So we run a master school, a doctoral training network, and we also, and this is maybe interesting for this audience, offer a variety of online courses or even e-courses that are free, self-directed, so you can, as a learner, choose when and where to learn. So these courses that you can also check out at our webpage are classified into 2 learning styles. We have a growing number of short courses, which are small online training modules that we have designed to be completed in 45 minutes, up to 3 hours. And you as the learner can actually gain a general or introductory understanding of a topic, for example, in relation to active mobility. And here you can actually find in our webpage the course already called Active Mobility at the Heart of Transport Modeling. The second type of lifelong learning activities we offer is massive open online courses, also known as Moocs, which are designed to be completed over a few weeks or months even. In these courses, you as the learner will develop a more comprehensive and in-depth understanding of the key urban mobility challenges. And in the field of active mobility, we currently offer 2 courses, no 3, sorry. One on methods for a people-centered design process for cycling infrastructure. Another one called Designing the Cycling City. And then finally, a more comprehensive one called Understanding Cycling in Europe. And all these courses and more are available in our webpage and can be easily accessed through the QR code you see here on the screen. And we are also finalizing a production of new courses. More than 10 short courses and 5 Moocs will be available by the end of the year. And the next issue here is, for me to close, is to point your attention to our flagship event, Tomorrow Mobility. We organize as EIT Mobility this together with the organizers behind the Smart City Expo, World Expo. And we will have in Barcelona a face-to-face conference over 3 days, 16th to 18th November. And please have a look if any of these topics would be of interest to you. From that event, we will live stream, and that will be the last slide, please. We will actually live stream there our final or our next mobility talks, number 12. This one will focus on sustainable city logistics, and of course, this will be accessible by online means. So hope to see you there if you have an interest also in city logistics and sustainability in the urban setting. So thank you very much to Jean-Paul, to all the presenters here, and thank you very much to the audience for spending time with us. Hope to see you around sometime soon.